Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. All protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, press, good morning. It's indeed a pleasure for me to have been, first of all, a member of the negotiating team led by our Honorable Minister, and the other members of the team. It was a really hectic 2.5 weeks, especially for those of us that attended the pre-sessionals as well, where we actually cemented the positions of the AOCIS grouping, Alliance of Small Island States, and the group of 77, and China, within which we negotiated. I also want to lift my hat off to Chief Negotiator, Mr. Clifford Malong, for really harmonizing the work of the team during the negotiating process. I won't be as long as he did in his presentation. I just wanted to pick up on the areas that we participated in, especially as the coordinator for the AOCIS grouping on the Adaptation Fund negotiations. And we negotiated there under two different bodies with respect to the Adaptation Fund. First of all, under the subsidiary bodies for technical advice to the convention, the SAPSTA body. And under that body, we actually negotiated, and these were negotiations in very, very closed rooms where, we had to fight out all the nitty-gritties there. And under that negotiations, we actually looked at the initial review of the Adaptation Fund to the conference of parties. And coming out of that, we had decisions that went to the Adaptation Fund Board for work to continue there. And the first decision emanating from that initial review of the Adaptation Fund dealt with the institutional arrangement with the World Bank as trustee for the Adaptation Fund, and that decision actually extended the trusteeship of the World Bank until June of 2015. The second decision coming out of the review was a request to the chair of the Adaptation Fund Board to discuss that extension of the World Bank as trustee and to see how best we can institutionalize that arrangement. Currently, it's an interim arrangement, and for the sustainability of the fund, that arrangement needs to be institutionalized. So the chair of the Adaptation Fund is to discuss with the trustee ways and means of institutionalizing that arrangement. It continued to also extend the interim institutional arrangement with the Secretariat of the Adaptation Fund Board. That interim arrangement is with the Global Environmental Facility, the GEF, to provide Secretariat services to the Adaptation Fund. And that arrangement is also, there's also a decision to institutionalize that arrangement. One of the contentious issues we have within that arrangement, or within that whole negotiation, is the lack of resources coming into the Adaptation Fund. Currently, it is being funded by 2% of the proceeds from Clean Development Mechanism projects and from donations from developed country parties. That is insufficient, and a little bit later on I'll give you just a very, very quick overview as to the status with respect to the Adaptation Fund and adaptation funding as we stand. We also negotiated under the COPMAP with respect to the report of the Adaptation Fund to the COPMAP, the Conference of the Parties, serving as meeting of the parties. That's a Kyoto part of it, because then the adaptation funds falls under one of the mechanisms of that institution. There's really one significant outcome there, where the decision was taken to consider the 9th meeting, that is next year in Poland, means to enhance the sustainability, adequacy, and predictability of resources, including the potential to diversify revenue streams of the Adaptation Fund, taking into consideration the report from the Adaptation Fund Board, requesting that we ensure predictability of funding to the Adaptation Fund. Now, Mr. Marlong spoke about the outcomes under the CMP with respect to adaptation funding. And in section 5, that is paragraphs 20, 21, and 22 of the KP report, the decisions are there. First one, 20, decides that the share of proceeds to assist developing country parties that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change to meet the cost of adaptation referred to in Article 12, paragraph 8 of the Kyoto Protocol and Decision 17 CP7, paragraph 15A, shall be maintained at 2% of CERs issued for project activities. So that 2% cap on CERs is maintained by this decision coming out of the CMP. As indicated, that one of the fight of the Adaptation Fund contact group was for upscaled financial resources to the fund. So para 21, the next decision decides also that for the second commitment period, the Adaptation Fund shall be further augmented through 2% of the share of proceeds levied on the first international transfer of the assigned amount units, the AAUs, and the issuance of ERUs for Article 6 projects immediately upon the conversions of these ERUs of the AAUs to the RMUs previously held by the parties. These are the reduction monitoring units and the emission reduction units. In that discussion, that decision, and in further discussion in the Adaptation Fund Board, currently the price of CER is very low. It has plummeted to, I think it's about 43 cents now per ton, which is nothing. So 2% of nothing is really nothing, right? So therefore, in our discussions at the Adaptation Fund Board meeting that I attended after the COP, we have actually mandated the trustee to project for us, you know, the amounts that we can expect from this levying of 2% of the proceeds under these two other mechanisms to see how much money that will be. Mr. Marlong spoke about the non-KP2, that's the parties that are not members of the second commitment period to participate in clean development projects. The discussion actually came out as to what the implications are with respect to the price of these emission reduction units. And currently, it's not pointing in the good in a good direction. As I said, 2% of nothing is really nothing. So we are hoping that with this signal that non-KP2 parties are not allowed to participate under the second commitment period would increase the price of CERs. So therefore, the price we are hoping will increase. And the third agreement in paragraph 2022 reaffirms that in accordance with Decision 17 CP7, Clean Development Mechanism project activities in least developed country parties shall continue to be exempt from the share of proceeds to assist with the cost of adaptation, which is pretty good. Right? So basically, for the Adaptation Fund, we were on a drive, on a mission to increase the amount of resources that are contributed to the Adaptation Fund, to fund concrete adaptation options in developing countries. If I may quickly, Mr. Chairman, just report briefly on the Adaptation Fund Board meeting that was held back to back. So I shifted from the desert into the refrigerator in Bonn, Germany. And at that meeting, we were able to approve, well, first of all, 12 proposals came to the Adaptation Fund Board for consideration, 3 being concepts and 9 being fully developed proposal. Out of the 3 concepts, 1 was endorsed, 2 was not endorsed. Out of the 9 fully developed proposals which came to the board, 6 were approved and 3 were not approved. Now, one of the challenges we faced at the start of the year in our projection, especially with the plummeting price of the CER, was that there is going to become a point when resources will dry up. 6 of the proposals that were approved, we were not able to commit funding for 4 of those. So we have actually established now in the Adaptation Fund a pipeline for projects, and 4 of these projects are now placed into the pipeline. It is sending the signal to the world, especially the developing world, that they need to now commit additional resources for developing countries to be able to implement their adaptation options, which are sound, which will provide concrete adaptation work in most vulnerable countries of the world, most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So currently there are 4 proposals in the pipeline, and there are others. We have concepts that have been endorsed, and we have other proposals that will be coming to the board. Now, with the projection, as I indicated, with the low price of CERs, and with the trustee indicating to us that we'll need another CMP decision to give them permission now to start monetizing the AAUs and the ERUs. It's another year before any amount of monies will be coming in. Now, I want to stop there, but just to indicate that, just like Rachel and her team with respect to the loss and damage, really stuck out for what is good and what is best for small island developing states. In Copenhagen, we also had to really stick out to call on developed countries to increase their funding of adaptation fund, and that also held up the Copenhagen agreement for a long while in 2009. And again, I think at the next COP, one of the things we'll have to do is to really hold out for the developed countries to fund these proposals that are now concrete proposals to assist developing countries to fully implement actions to combat against the impacts of climate change. So we will definitely continue as Jamaica, as a team, to fight for adaptation options. Thank you very much.